Good evening, and welcome to Restored Lore, your home for old, odd, and obscure stories. Tonight we return to Japan for the first time in a while with The Story of Itō Norisuké, as told by Lafcadio Hearn. This story comes from Hearn's collection, The Romance of the Milky Way and Other Stories, first published in 1905. This is one of those highly atmospheric stories. Even as events get stranger and stranger, the mood gets more and more calm and dreamlike, with peaceful acknowledgement of the darkness and mystery. Now, let's open our imaginations and begin. In the town of Uji, in the province of Yamashiro, there lived, about 600 years ago, a young samurai named Itō Tatewaki Norisuké, whose ancestors were of the Heike clan. Itō was of handsome person and amiable character, a good scholar and apt at arms. But his family were poor, and he had no patron among the military nobility, so that his prospects were small. He lived in a very quiet way, devoting himself to the study of literature and having, says the Japanese storyteller, only the moon and wind for friends. One autumn evening, as he was taking a solitary walk in the neighborhood of the hill called Kotobiki-yama, he happened to overtake a young girl who was following the same path. She was richly dressed and seemed to be about 11 or 12 years old. Itō greeted her and said, "The sun will soon be setting, damsel, and this is rather a lonesome place. May I ask if you have lost your way?" She looked up at him with a bright smile and answered deprecatingly, "Nay, I am a Miyazukai serving in this neighborhood, and I have only a little way to go." By her use of the term Miyazukai, Itō knew the girl must be in the service of persons of rank, and her statement surprised him because he had never heard of any family of distinction residing in that vicinity. But he only said, "I am returning to Uji, where my home is. Perhaps you will allow me to accompany you on the way, as this is a very lonesome place." She thanked him gracefully, seeming pleased by his offer, and they walked on together, chatting as they went. She talked about the weather, the flowers, the butterflies, and the birds, about a visit that she had once made to Uji, about the famous sights of the capital where she had been born, and the moments passed pleasantly for Itō as he listened to her fresh prattle. Presently, at a turn in the road, they entered a hamlet densely shadowed by a grove of young trees. Lafcadio Hearn now says, "Here I must interrupt the story to tell you that, without having actually seen them, you cannot imagine how dark some Japanese country villages remain even in the brightest and hottest weather. In the neighborhood of Tokyo itself, there are many villages of this kind. At a short distance from such a settlement, you see no houses. Nothing is visible but a dense grove of evergreen trees. The grove, which is usually composed of young cedars and bamboos, serves to shelter the village from storms and also to supply timber for various purposes. So closely are the trees planted that there is no room to pass between the trunks of them. They stand straight as masts and mingle their crests so as to form a roof that excludes the sun. Each thatched cottage occupies a clear space in the plantation, the trees forming a fence about it, double the height of the building. Under the trees it is always twilight, even at high noon, and the houses, morning or evening, are half in shadow. What makes the first impression of such a village almost disquieting is not the transparent gloom, which has a certain weird charm of its own, but the stillness. There may be 50 or 100 dwellings, but you see nobody, and you hear no sound but the twitter of invisible birds, the occasional crowing of cocks, and the shrilling of cicada. Even the cicada, however, find these groves too dim and sing faintly. Being sun lovers, they prefer the trees outside the village. I forgot to say that you may sometimes hear a viewless shuttle, shakaton, shakaton. But that familiar sound, in that great green silence, seems an elfish happening. The reason of the hush is simply that the people are not home. All of the adults, excepting some feeble elders, have gone to the neighboring fields, the women carrying their babies on their backs, and most of the children have gone to the nearest school, perhaps not less than a mile away. Verily, in these dim, hushed villages, one seems to behold the mysterious perpetuation of conditions recorded in the texts of Kwang-tse. The ancients who had the nourishment of the world wished for nothing, and the world had enough. They did nothing, and all things were transformed. Their stillness was abysmal, and the people were all composed. That's the end of this author's aside. The village was very dark when Itō reached it, for the sun had set, and the afterglow made no twilight in the shadowing of the trees. "Now, kind sir," the child said, pointing to a narrow lane opening upon the main road, "I have to go this way." "Permit me, then, to see you home," Itō responded, and he turned into the lane with her, feeling rather than seeing his way. But the girl soon stopped before a small gate dimly visible in the gloom, a gate of trellis work beyond which the lights of a dwelling could be seen. "Here," she said, "is the honorable residence in which I serve. As you have come thus far out of your way, kind sir, will you not deign to enter and to rest a while?" Itō assented. He was pleased by the informal invitation, and he wished to learn what persons of superior condition had chosen to reside in so lonesome a village. He knew that sometimes a family of rank would retire in this manner from public life by reason of government displeasure or political trouble, and he imagined that such might be the history of the occupants of the dwelling before him. Passing the gate which his young guide opened for him, he found himself in a large, quaint garden. A miniature landscape, traversed by a winding stream, was faintly distinguishable. "Deign for one little moment to wait," the child said. "I go to announce the honorable coming," and hurried toward the house. It was a spacious house, but seemed very old and built in the fashion of another time. The sliding doors were not closed, but the lighted interior was concealed by a beautiful bamboo curtain extending along the gallery front. Behind it, shadows were moving. Shadows of women, and suddenly the music of a koto rippled into the night. So light and sweet was the playing that Itō could scarcely believe the evidence of his senses. A slumberous feeling of delight stole over him as he listened, a delight strangely mingled with sadness. He wondered how any woman could have learned to play thus, wondered whether the player could be a woman, wondered even whether he was hearing earthly music, for enchantment seemed to have entered into his blood with the sound of it. The soft music ceased, and almost at the same moment Itō found the little Miyazukai beside him. "Sir," she said, "it is requested that you will honorably enter." She conducted him to the entrance, where he removed his sandals, and an aged woman, whom he thought to be the Rojo, or matron of the household, came to welcome him at the threshold. The old woman then led him through many apartments to a large and well-lighted room in the rear of the house, and with many respectful salutations respected him to take the place of honor accorded to guests of distinction. He was surprised by the stateliness of the chamber and the curious beauty of its decorations. Presently some maidservants brought refreshments, and he noticed that the cups and other vessels set before him were of rare and costly workmanship, and ornamented with a design indicating the high rank of the possessor. More and more he wondered what noble person had chosen this lonely retreat, and what happening could have inspired the wish for such solitude. But the aged attendant suddenly interrupted his reflections with the question, "Am I wrong in supposing that you are Itō-sama of Uji, Itō Tatewaki Norisuké?" Itō bowed in assent. He had not told his name to the little Miyazukai, and the manner of inquiry startled him. "Please do not think my question rude," continued the attendant. An old woman like myself may ask questions without improper curiosity. When you came to the house, I thought that I knew your face, and I asked your name only to clear away all doubt before speaking of other matters. I have something of moment to tell you. You often pass through this village, and our young Hime-Gimi-sama happened one morning to see you go by, and ever since that moment she has been thinking about you, day and night. Indeed, she thought so much that she became ill, and we have been very uneasy about her. For that reason, I took means to find out your name and residence, and I was on the point of sending you a letter when, so unexpectedly, you came to our gate with the little attendant. Now, to say how happy I am to see you is not possible. It seems almost too fortunate a happening to be true. Really, I think that this meeting must have been brought about by favor of Enmusibi no Kami, that great god of Izumo who ties the knots of fortunate union. And now that so lucky a destiny has led you hither, perhaps you will not refuse, if there be no obstacle by the way of such a union, to make happy the heart of our Himigimi-sama. For the moment, Itō did not know how to reply. If the old woman had spoken the truth, an extraordinary chance was being offered to him. Only a great passion could impel the daughter of a noble house to seek of her own will the affection of an obscure and masterless samurai possessing neither wealth nor any sort of prospects. On the other hand, it was not in the honorable nature of the man to further his own interests by taking advantage of a feminine weakness. Moreover, the circumstances were disquietingly mysterious. Yet, how to decline the proposal so unexpectedly made troubled him not a little. After a short silence, he replied, "There would be no obstacle, as I have no wife, and no betrothed, and no relation with any woman. Until now I have lived with my parents, and the matter of my marriage was never discussed by them. You must know that I am a poor samurai without any patron among persons of rank, and I did not wish to marry until I could find some chance to improve my condition. As to the proposal which you have done me the very great honor to make, I can only say that I know myself yet unworthy of the notice of any noble maiden." The old woman smiled as if pleased by these words, and responded, "Until you have seen our Himigimi-sama, it were better that you make no decision. Perhaps you will feel no hesitation after you have seen her. Deign now to come with me, that I may present you to her." She conducted him to another, larger guest room, where preparations for a feast had been made, and, having shown him the place of honor, left him for a moment alone. She returned, accompanied by the Himigimi-sama, and at the first sight of the young mistress, Itō felt again the strange thrill of wonder and delight that had come to him in the garden as he listened to the music of the koto. Never had he dreamed of so beautiful a being. Light seemed to radiate from her presence and to shine through her garments as the light of the moon through flossy clouds. Her loosely flowing hair swayed about her as she moved, like the boughs of the drooping willow bestirred by the breezes of spring. Her lips were like the flowers of the peach besprinkled with morning dew. Itō was bewildered by the vision. He asked himself whether he was not looking upon the person of Amano Kawara no Orihime herself, the weaving maiden who dwells by the shining river of heaven. Smiling, the aged woman turned to the fair one, who remained speechless, with downcast eyes and flushing cheeks, and said to her, "See, my child, at the moment when we could at least have hoped for such a thing, the very person whom you wished to meet has come of his own accord. So fortunate a happening could have been brought about only by the will of the high gods. To think of it makes me weep for joy." And she sobbed aloud. "But now," she continued, wiping away her tears with her sleeve, "it only remains for you both unless either prove unwilling, which I doubt, to pledge yourselves to each other and to partake of your wedding feast." Itō answered by no word. The incomparable vision before him had numbed his will and tied his tongue. Maidservants entered, bearing dishes and wine. The wedding feast was spread before the pair, and the pledges were given. Itō nevertheless remained as in a trance. The marvel of the adventure and the wonder of the beauty of the bride still bewildered him. A gladness beyond aught that he had ever known before filled his heart like a great silence. But gradually he recovered his wonted calm, and thereafter found himself able to converse without embarrassment. Of the wine he partook freely, and he ventured to speak, in a self-deprecating but merry way, about the doubts and fears that had oppressed him. Meanwhile, the bride remained still as moonlight, never lifting her eyes, and replying only by a blush or a smile when he addressed her. Itō said to the aged attendant, "Many times in my solitary walks I have passed through this village without knowing of the existence of this honorable dwelling, and ever since entering here I have been wondering why this noble household should have chosen so lonesome a place of sojourn. Now that your Hime-Gimi-sama and I have become pledged to each other, it seems to me a strange thing that I do not yet know the name of her august family." At this utterance a shadow passed over the kindly face of the old woman, and the bride, who had yet hardly spoken, turned pale and appeared to become painfully anxious. After some moments of silence, the aged woman responded, "To keep our secrets from you much longer would be difficult, and I think that, under any circumstances, you should be made aware of the facts, now that you are one of us. Know then, Sir Itō, that your bride is the daughter of Shigehira Kyo, the great and unfortunate Sanmi Chujo." At these words, Shigehira Kyo, Sanmi Chujo, the young samurai felt a chill as of ice strike through all of his veins. Shigehira Kyo, the great general and statesman, had been dust for centuries. And Itō suddenly understood that everything around him, the chamber and the lights and the banquet, was a dream of the past, that the forms before him were not people, but shadows of people dead. But in another instant the icy chill had passed, and the charm returned and seemed to deepen about him, and he felt no fear. Though his bride had come to him out of Yomi, out of the place of the yellow springs of death, his heart had been wholly won. Who weds a ghost must become a ghost, yet he knew himself ready to die, not once but many times, rather than betray by word or look one thought that might bring a shadow of pain to the brow of the beautiful illusion before him. Of the affection proffered he had no misgiving. The truth had been told him when any unloving purpose might better have been served by deception. But these thoughts and emotions passed in a flash, leaving him resolved to accept the strange situation as it had presented itself, and to act just as he would have done if chosen in the years of Juei by Shigehira's daughter. "Ah, the pity of it!" he exclaimed. "I have heard of the cruel fate of the august Lord Shigehira." Shigehira, after a brave fight in defense of the capital, then held by the Taira or Heike party, was surprised and routed by Yohitsune, leader of the Minamoto forces. A soldier named Ayanaga, who was a skilled archer, shot down Shigehira's horse, and Shigehira fell under the struggling animal. He cried to an attendant to bring another horse, but the man fled. Shigehira was then captured by Ayanaga and eventually given up to Yoritomo, head of the Minamoto clan, who caused him to be sent in a cage to Kamakura. There, after sundry humiliations, he was treated for a time with consideration, having been able, by a Chinese poem, to touch even the cruel heart of Yoritomo. But in the following year he was executed by request of the Buddhist priests of Nanto, against whom he had formerly waged war by order of Kiyomori. "Aye," responded the aged woman, sobbing as she spoke. "It was indeed a cruel fate. His horse, you know, was killed by an arrow and fell upon him, and when he called for help, those who had lived upon his bounty deserted him in his need. Then he was taken prisoner and sent to Kamakura, where they treated him shamefully and at last put him to death. His wife and child, this dear maid here, were then in hiding, for everywhere the Heike were being sought out and killed. When the news of the Lord Shigehira's death reached us, the pain proved too great for the mother to bear, so the child was left with no one to care for her but me, since her kindred had all perished or disappeared. She was only 5 years old. I had been her milk nurse, and I did what I could for her. Year after year we wandered from place to place, traveling in pilgrim garb. But these tales of grief are ill-timed," exclaimed the nurse, wiping away her tears. "Pardon the foolish heart of an old woman who cannot forget the past. See, the little maid whom I fostered has now become a Himigimi-sama indeed. Were we living in the good days of the Emperor Takakura, what a destiny might be reserved for her. However, she has obtained the husband whom she desired, and that is the greatest happiness. But the hour is late. The bridal chamber has been prepared, and I must now leave you to care for each other until morning." She rose, and sliding back the screens parting the guest room from an adjoining chamber, ushered them into their sleeping apartment. Then, with many words of joy and congratulation, she withdrew, and Itō was left alone with his bride. As they reposed together, Itō said, "Tell me, my loved one, when was it that you first wished to have me for your husband?" For everything appeared so real that he had almost ceased to think of the illusion woven around him. She answered in a voice like a dove's voice, "My august lord and husband, it was at the temple of Ishiyama, where I went with my foster mother, that I saw you for the first time. And because of seeing you, the world became changed to me from that hour and moment. But you do not remember, because our meeting was not in this, your present life. It was very, very long ago. Since that time, you have passed through many deaths and births, and have had many comely bodies. But I have remained always that which you see me now. I could not obtain another body, nor enter into another state of existence, because of my great wish for you. My dear lord and husband, I have waited for you through many ages of men." And the bridegroom felt nowise afraid at hearing these strange words, but desired nothing more in life or in all his lives to come than to feel her arms about him and to hear the caress of her voice. But the pealing of a temple bell proclaimed the coming of dawn. Birds began to twitter. A morning breeze set all the trees a-whispering. Suddenly the old nurse pushed apart the sliding screens of the bridal chamber and exclaimed, "My children, it is time to separate. By daylight you must not be together even for an instant. That were fatal. You must bid each other goodbye." Without a word, Itō made ready to depart. He vaguely understood the warning uttered and resigned himself wholly to destiny. His will belonged to him no more. He desired only to please his shadowy bride. She placed in his hands a little suzuri, or inkstone, curiously carved, and said, "My young lord and husband is a scholar, therefore this small gift will probably not be despised by him. It is of strange fashion because it is old, having been augustly bestowed upon my father by the favor of the Emperor Takakura. For that reason only, I thought it to be a precious thing." Itō, in return, besought her to accept for a remembrance the kogai of his sword, which were decorated with inlaid work of silver and gold representing plum flowers and nightingales. Then the little Miyazukai came to guide him through the garden, and his bride with her foster mother accompanied him to the threshold. As he turned at the foot of the steps to make his parting salute, the old woman said, "We shall meet again the next year of the boar, at the same hour of the same day of the same month that you came here. This being the year of the tiger, you will have to wait 10 years, but for reasons which I must not say, we shall not be able to meet again in this place. We are going to the neighborhood of Kyoto, where the good Emperor Takakura and our fathers and many of our people are dwelling. All the Heike will be rejoiced by your coming. We shall send a cargo or palanquin for you on the appointed day." Above the village the stars were burning as Itō passed to the gate, but on reaching the open road he saw the dawn brightening beyond leagues of silent fields. In his bosom he carried the gift of his bride. The charm of her voice lingered in his ears, and, nevertheless, had it not been for the memento which he touched with questioning fingers, he could have persuaded himself that the memories of the night were memories of sleep, and that his life still belonged to him. But the certainty that he had doomed himself evoked no least regret. He was troubled only by the pain of separation and the thought of the seasons that would have to pass before the illusion could be renewed for him. 10 years, and every day of those years would seem how long? The mystery of the delay he could not hope to solve. The secret ways of the dead are known to the gods alone. Often and often in his solitary walks, Itō revisited the village at Kotobikiyama, vaguely hoping to obtain another glimpse of the past. But never again, by night or by day, was he able to find the rustic gate in the shadowed lane. Never again could he perceive the figure of the little Miyazukai walking alone in the sunset glow. The village people, whom he questioned carefully, thought him bewitched. No person of rank, they said, had ever dwelt in the settlement, and there had never been in the neighborhood any such garden as he described. But there had once been a great Buddhist temple near the place of which he spoke, and some gravestones of the temple cemetery were still to be seen. Itō discovered the monuments in the middle of a dense thicket. They were of an ancient Chinese form and were covered with moss and lichens. The characters that had been cut upon them could no longer be deciphered. Of his adventure Itō spoke to no one, but friends and kindred soon perceived a great change in his appearance and manner. Day by day he seemed to become more pale and thin, though physicians declared that he had no bodily ailment. He looked like a ghost and moved like a shadow. Thoughtful and solitary he had always been, but now he appeared indifferent to everything which had formerly given him pleasure, even to those literary studies by means of which he might have hoped to win distinction. To his mother, who thought that marriage might quicken his former ambition and revive his interest in life, he said that he had made a vow to marry no living woman. And the months dragged by. At last came the year of the boar and the season of autumn, but Itō could no longer take the solitary walks that he loved. He could not even rise from his bed. His life was ebbing, though none could divine the cause, and he slept so deeply and so long that his sleep was often mistaken for death. Out of such a sleep he was startled one bright evening by the voice of a child, and he saw at his bedside the little Miyazukai who had guided him 10 years before to the gate of the vanished garden. She saluted him and smiled and said, "I am bidden to tell you that you will be received tonight at Ohara near Kyoto, where the new home is, and that a cargo has been sent for you." Then she disappeared. Itō knew that he was being summoned away from the light of the sun, but the message so rejoiced him that he found strength to sit up and call his mother. To her he then for the first time related the story of his bridal and showed her the inkstone which had been given him. He asked that it should be placed on his coffin, and then he died. The inkstone was buried with him, But after the funeral ceremonies, it was examined by experts who said that it had been made in the period of Zhou-an and that it bore the seal mark of an artist who had lived in the time of the Emperor Takakura. I really enjoy this story. I really love how Ito suddenly and completely realizes what's going on, and then just as suddenly and completely resigns himself to the situation and agrees to die for love. It's like the princess saw him one time and pined for him for 600 years, and he's now, returning the favor. It gives the story a very lovely, sadly sweet tone. And I do sympathize with the ghosts and the, eternal love and everything, but it does seem like they should have explained the situation before he took the marriage vow. The nurse says, "Well, I may as well tell you everything because you're one of us now." And he seems to appreciate her honesty, but it doesn't exactly seem fair. Although Lafcadio Hearn doesn't disclose his sources here, one of the most fascinating aspects of this type of Japanese folklore for me is that it's almost always historically accurate. And of course, my mind just boggles at a culture with so much history to draw from. So, Lord Shigehira was one of the chief commanders of the Taira clan during the 12th century. During the siege of Nara in 1180, he did burn the monks of the Todaiji monastery. He was captured in 1184 and he was turned over to the monks who killed him in revenge. Minamoto no Yoritomo did appoint himself a shogun, and the Kamigura shogunate lasted until 1333. Interestingly, this period of time is linked with the decline of that very monastery when political power shifted from imperial power in Nara to the power of the shoguns in Kamakura, with just a figurehead emperor in Kyoto. Spiritual power kind of followed it, leaving the monastery neglected and overlooked. From its founding in 738, Todaiji had been the center of Japanese Buddhism, and all official ordinations took place there for like 500 years. Wikipedia says that the Vinaya lineage also died out, which makes it impossible to perform ordinations there today. And to be honest, I don't understand that at all. As far as I understand it, a Vinaya is a text and a system of rules and practices for monks and priests, so I don't understand how it can also be a lineage that would die out. But I also don't understand Buddhism, and I especially don't understand East Asian Buddhist practices. If anybody might be able to clarify in the comments below, that would be amazing. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you get to hear me make a little confession. Tonight's confession is that I think of myself as being pretty resistant and cynical about advertising, and I'm not that susceptible to commercial offers. But boy, does the Netherlands train service have my number. I'm on their email mailing list, both NS Domestic and NS International, specifically because they send emails like, "How about a little trip to Delft? Here's a discount for an overnight and breakfast. Do you want to take the ferry to England for 50 euros? How about the train to Paris for 35? And I'm always like, "Oh, yes!" They send something with like the 5 best day trips in the Netherlands, or the 8 greatest castles, or the top hiking areas, or whatever. And I always, always, always want to do those things. Years ago, I was part of an international group and we were having our annual meeting, and it happened to be in China. So it was an opportunity for me to get a free trip to China. And of course, in order to go to China, I had to go to the consulate and apply in person for a visa and then wait for them to process it. So I had to travel to San Francisco for a couple of days. So I was telling one of my coworkers at the time that it was totally worth it to pay for a trip to San Francisco in order to get a free trip to China, and she kind of made a face. And I said, "What, wouldn't you take a free trip to China?" And she said, "No, honestly, I don't think I would." And this incident revealed something about myself to me, which is that there is just about no force on earth that would make me turn down a free trip to China. or anywhere really. It's just not in my character. Like, I don't want to go to the club. I probably won't go to the music festival. I barely want to go to a movie, but I will drop just about anything to go on a road trip, to go on a boat trip, to get on a train, to get on a plane. It's one of the things I love most about living in Europe, too. It's so complex and different, even though things are so close together and they're so accessible. Traveling for just an hour or two can take you somewhere completely new and different and unfamiliar and exciting. It is so cool. I also think it's increasingly important for us to practice seeing different things and practice seeing things differently. We're all facing very similar problems, and it's worth considering how other people are struggling with those problems, working on them, and solving them. I also really want to mention, but I don't know where to fit it in, so it's just going to go in here, how lovely you guys were after my little lament last week. I didn't intend it to be a pity party, but a few of you reached out with some very kind words, and it really did make me feel a lot better. Thank you so much. If you're fascinated by Japan and Buddhism and the unfamiliar world, or if you just like weird old stories, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Drop me a like or a comment below and let me know what you think. I really love to read it, and it really does help other people find the channel. Finally, if you want to support me even further, consider using the link below to buy me a coffee. Thank you again for all the support, and I will see you in a few days.